All right. Welcome to What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. I am your host. My name is Kyle. And for all the listeners that are brand new to the show, this is a show where I interview Diaspora Asians about their life stories and experiences. They are really cool people that I think you will find interesting and inspirational, and you will learn a lot of cool things about what they do and what they're all about. And if you want to support this podcast, it's really easy. Just keep listening and also follow the podcast on your streaming platforms. Check us out on YouTube and also follow the Instagram at What Kind of Asian Pod. And if you really like the podcast, make sure to share with your friends and family. Having the word out on this podcast to all your friends and family will definitely help this podcast grow and allow me to continue to bring in more interesting guests along the way. And with this podcast, I've been very fortunate to be able to talk to a lot of cool diaspora Asians about their life and stories. Today's guest is someone who I have been wanting to bring on for a very long time. She is a content creator that I think I found through various ways, and we just started connecting, and I really appreciate what she puts out because I think what her content means is a lot to me, just because of how I see my own identity and how I find my cultural kind of connection strengthened throughout the years. And she does a lot of stuff about that. So rather than me kind of going through like how much I appreciate her content, I'll just let her introduce herself and tell us more about what she does. And without further ado, we have Kaiyan. Hi, Kaiyan. How are you doing today?
Hello, Kyle. 你好. Hello, 大家好. I'm good. Sorry. Hi, everyone.
Yes, that's the problem when we know multiple languages and you do content in multiple languages. I understand. Sometimes it's hard to change the channel.
That took me a little bit before I realized it. Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Kaiyan Wong. I'm so happy to be here. And so, yes, I grew up in Hong Kong, but originally I was actually born in Macau. And so, yeah, I grew up in Hong Kong, and I did have a pretty ordinary life as well. So just a normal kid, with parents, and I have one younger brother. And actually, I don't know if that actually relate, but growing up, my parents always worry about my English not being really good, right? That's a very common Hong Konger, right? Hong Kong parents worry about, because English is such an important language. But yeah, so I fail a lot, and I guess I wasn't really a good student, but yeah, somehow I end up in United States, and now I'm speaking in English on a podcast.
That's great. And I love how like you're fully prepared to tell the audience like who you are, what you're about, and kind of what kind of Asian are you. Because sometimes when I ask the question, what kind of Asian are you to my guests, sometimes you're like, oh, wow, I thought I knew. But then like, oh, now you're really asking me. It's like, oh, I need a second to kind of formulate my thoughts, even though I kind of like have a pre-call with them sometimes to be like, yeah, this is the question I ask. And you can think of something and then normally be like, oh yeah, I will. And then in the end, it's like, oh, actually, I need a little more time, or like, I'm not sure exactly how to describe, but you're able to do it really nicely. So I guess for the audience, if they're not familiar with kind of like how it works in terms of people that are like the immigrants and such. So you are a Hong Konger, you grew up in Hong Kong, and then can you just talk about your kind of immigration journey to America, because that's where you are now and you're pretty much based with a family in America. So can you just talk about like the, I guess, immigration story, because I know it's kind of an interesting one where it's not as typical as other kind of immigration story where, oh, I've moved to America with my whole family. Yours was a little different. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yes, definitely. I would love to. So yes, first of all, I want to respond back to what you mentioned about, me knowing how to answer the question, because I've been a fan of What Kind of Asian Are You?
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. So ever since, I think the very first episode I listened to was actually with Randy. And that's how I found out about you, because I've been following him. And anyway, so that was like, okay, very interesting, title, podcast name. And then I already started asking myself, what kind of Asian am I? So I've been, here and there thinking about it. So anyways, How I ended up in US, I was so I was in form 5, with that's what we call in Hong Kong, which is equivalent to what, how many, 6 plus Jung. Okay, anyways, I think it's 11th
16
grade. Or
when you're
yeah,
around 16,
17, no, 17,
yeah,
18.
17, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 11th grade. No, 12th grade or
Oh,
11th
okay.
grade.
So pretty much
Anyways,
when you're done high school, almost.
yes, the very last year of Hong Kong high school journey. And there is a HKCEE, which is the, standardized open examination for the whole Hong Kong student at that grade level to determine whether or not you are able to go back in and do 2 more years of high school, then prepare yourself to go to college. And in Hong Kong, it's super competitive, right? With college. Anyway, so long story short, my grade wasn't that brilliant, right? So I knew that I won't be able to continue, like, further my education as far as going to college in Hong Kong. So at that point, most of the students are either going to specialized schools, such as, like, going to school for cooking or become a secretary, or you start working, right? And then you go work at restaurant or retail or whatever that is, right? So I didn't want to do any of that. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to do any of that. So, and then it's really strange. One time it was after gym class in Hong Kong, I was getting a sip of water from the water fountain. And then I look up, and then it's this, like, flyer, like this big, legitimately like a postcard size. And it's a stack of them. And then it's called EF. So Educational Foundation, I think. It's a foreign exchange student program. So I was like, okay. So I grabbed one, didn't think too much of it. And then I kind of read it. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to apply. So I apply. They called me for an interview. I went on interview, and then my English barely passed, right? The level. And then so one day they gave me a call. They said, hey, congratulations, like, you passed. So you can start creating a photo album to introduce yourself and blah, blah, blah. So then a host family from United States, because I could choose to go to US, England, Australia, I think, or Canada. So those are a few countries that I could choose from. So I chose United States. And so that's when I told my parents, hey, I need you to buy me a ticket so I can go to United States to become a foreign exchange student. And then they said, what? No, you're not. Because I wasn't even 18 yet. I was like, yes, I am. And so that's kind of like how I, that's the ticket to come to America as a foreign exchange student. And I was a senior in high school in a small town in Iowa in the Midwest. Wow. Yes. So it's a huge culture shock, but that's kind of like my journey when I first came.
Oh, so it was just based on, like, oh, you want to find other options beyond what's there that are in Hong Kong that you weren't that interested in. And then you ended up in Iowa, where you kind of, I guess, finished the last year of high school in America, for sure, given the education system there. And how was your experience like for that very first year with all the culture shock and stuff? What was the biggest thing that kind of really blew you away in terms of, like, oh, I'm not used to this, or like, wow, I didn't expect like this and all that stuff?
Very good question. And there's so many pictures popping out in my head right now. And it's so fun. It was so fun. And it was so different. And so first of all, when I received a phone call saying that a family from Iowa want you to stay with them for a year, I was like, where's Iowa? And then I was like, and at that point I said, what NBA team do they have?
Oh, okay.
They said, there's no NBA team, but it's close to, it's next to Chicago and it's below Minnesota. So I was like, okay, so it's close to the Chicago Bulls. And, I love Michael Jordan then. So I was like, okay, it can't be that bad. So when I flew in and the person on the custom, he said, you're going to Iowa, good luck. That's what he said
Oh,
to me.
wow.
So I was like, okay, whatever that means. And then so my first when I first landed, it was already midnight. So it was late. And then I saw my host parents, and they are really tall compared to people from Hong Kong, right? They're really tall. And so I got into the car, and they had to drive 45 minutes to go back home. And the very next day I had to go to school already.
Wow.
So yes, and I did not know anything. I did not meet anybody. So that was the first day of school. And then second thing that it really hits me was I could not fall asleep for 2 weeks. I had trouble falling asleep for 2 weeks, not because of jet lag, but because it was so quiet. It was so quiet to the point that it has like this silence noise. I could hear the bugs outside, and it was just so different because I was so used to falling asleep with people yelling each other, cars
The big
honking.
city kind of.
Right. Right. So that was another big shock. And then another thing that it was a culture shock to me also was, well, I guess I'm not sure if it's a culture shock, but maybe it is. But back home is always eating with someone, having lunch together. I guess it was just me being new, and because I didn't know anybody, and I had to go to school and eat lunch by myself,
Oh.
and that was so sad. And I'm so used to eating rice and noodles, like hot lunches. And then for the first couple of weeks, and all I had was making a roast beef sandwich or turkey sandwich. And then I do not like bread.
Oh.
Um, and so I was like, every bite, like so sad, like every bite I have a tear, and I had to call long distance. I'm like, I want to come home.
And then your
So
parents were like, well, you wanted it. So
yes, right, exactly. They're like, oh, just hanging there, hanging there. And
mhm.
then basically the turning point was when I told myself that I can either sit there and cry every day by myself, or I can just step out of my comfort zone. And I think that was the very first time that I tried to really like real moment stretching my comfort zone. Is the Sunday before school. This is what is going through my head. I can't live like this, right? There's a whole year in front of me. So I just need to, who cares that my English is not good? I just need to like big smile and wave at people, and like just sit next to somebody and start eating lunch with them. And that's exactly what I did. And and I think that kind of changed everything. From that day on, I was just making more friends. And what I realized was that, speaking of, Asian and coming to America, or a foreign language, what I found out was that people, the locals, were very interested in talking to me too. But they were also just nervous. They didn't know how to approach me. They didn't know if I wanted to talk to them, right? So the feeling was kind of mutual. So once I crossed that bridge, then everyone would just kind of like, oh, asking me a lot of questions, asking me how to say bad words in Cantonese, I guess. Typical high school kids, right?
That's
Yeah.
great. So you literally just went out of your comfort zone and you started enjoying yourself and like being able to really see how America is during that whole year. And
Yes.
with all foreign exchange kind of program, it's like either X amount of time and then you go back home and you do something else. So what made you kind of finish the whole year and then decide, oh, I could though stay longer and continue your education in America, and that's what you did. Can you just talk about like what kind of thought process went into that? Like why did you decide to stay and all that stuff?
Yeah, and this is like live moment right now, me kind of thinking, like going back and search for the memories, because it has been so long ago. But I had amazing experience that one year, and I made some good friends, including boyfriend. So then I went back home, and I went back home because I had to, and I worked in Hong Kong for a year after that as a tutor. So I tutor, like I had my own classroom, the after school program. Yeah.
Yes.
So I have 15 students and, I'm Miss Wong. And then, so, so at that point, I was really, again, like asking myself, what can I do? Like, it wasn't a bad job of what I was doing. I always loved kids and I always wanted to be a teacher. But, even though I wasn't a real teacher, but it was cool. It was nice. But then I was like, okay, I do want to further my education. So again, I couldn't further my education in Hong Kong, or it would be a lot more difficult. So then my host parents, I still keep in touch with them. So then we were talking. So okay, so I applied, and then for school in America, also in Iowa, and then they accepted me. So I came back to United States, and I had to take ESL classes, for a couple years. And then you have to take the TOEFL test. And I finally passed that. And that's when I could transfer to university. And that's kind of like the transition. So why did I want to come back to America? I think growing up in a traditional Chinese family, I feel like that I always been a black sheep, or so to speak, people like 好反叛. How do you translate that?
Rebellious.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that. And then rebellious. And so I feel very comfortable being in America, perhaps because my parents are not like right next to me. But I just feel like I feel more, I can be more myself. I can act the way that I want to act rather than being, oh, you're a girl, you need to be like acting like a girl, right? Like, and I'm always loud, and I always like I would rather learn taekwondo than playing piano, And I guess over there it wasn't frowned upon, but it was just like, oh, she is so like 男仔頭, like so tomboy, right?
Would you say like you felt being in Hong Kong was very restrictive, or like you wouldn't be able to do what you want to do in a way that you won't be looked down on, or kind of just you were happier doing it elsewhere rather than Hong Kong? You just felt like it was more freeing.
It was more free, yes. And I think you're right. It's more, if I do exactly what I wanted to do, I feel like I'm being judged by relatives, and my parents are super, like, I'm very close to my mom and my dad also, but my dad's just quiet. But I'm very close to them, and they are very supportive of everything that I do and every choice that I make. So that I know they will support me however I want to act or whatever. But then I don't want them to have to deal with the relatives. I don't want them to have to hear them, run their mouth to them.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think, and also I just like the America, just freedom, right? It's America. So
It's great that you had like a great experience overall, because there are cases where foreign exchange experience will turn like negative, or like it was just like, oh, it was interesting, but
yeah.
like I wouldn't want to go back, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
you kind of had a good experience and you decided, oh, university in America was your way to like kind of figure out what you want to do and make a life somewhere.
Mhm.
And you finished university. What did you end up kind of doing? Did you stay in America, or you kind of did something else? What was the kind of the next steps after university for you?
Yeah, into adulthood, right?
Hmm.
Into adulthood. So yes, university, I switched my major like 10 trillion times, so many times, well, like a lot of times. And similar to AJ, your previous guest,
Hmm.
I was in fine art, and then I transferred university, and I was going for interior design, then was trying to go for architecture, then realized that I have so many more years for school if I do that program after I transfer to a different university. And so then basically, if it's still utilizing my design, like art, like passion, I chose advertising. because it still has graphic design, blends into it. And the reason for that I didn't go for fine art is because my parents were typical Chinese parents. They didn't want me to be a poor, starving artist.
Yeah.
So go for something that is more professional. So I went for advertising. So that's my degree. And I graduated in 2008. That's when the economy crashed, right?
Yes.
And advertising agency was closing left and right, or they were just cutting budget, not really hiring, or right. So it was really hard for me to find like graphic design, advertising related job if it's in the creative field. And perhaps I was really new, right? I just a new graduate, so with zero experience, and they were really looking for people with experience. I interned for one semester for free. It was a great experience just to build up my portfolio, but that wasn't enough. Anyhow, I moved from Iowa to California, to Southern California, because that's where my uncle lives and his family. So I could crash with them and rent free, right? So they were very nice. They were very welcoming and took me in. And I started look for a job immediately. And a sales company hired me.
Oh.
So it's a sales company, and that's kind of like going into a different, like my next chapter of my life. And I don't have any bad things to say about this new chapter. In fact, it's so good. It people might think like, okay, you're in advertising, you're with art background, but you're doing sales. Like, what are you doing? But so that's when I gained like so much business knowledge, entrepreneurship, and leadership skill, and really developed my leadership skills, which is something that I'm very passionate about, and I share at Mime Time as well. With kind of like what I want to do with my son and the next generation. So that's kind of like my adulthood, right? That's how I started I guess you can say the business side of me. So I did business to business sales for about, I think, close to 2 years, a little bit less than, but close to 2 years. And then when they opened up a new branch in the East Coast in Connecticut, right next to New York, they were kind of putting the pieces together, right? Like, who is going to expand out, and they asked me if I wanted to go. I was like, yes, I'm in. I was single, and I'm in America. I moved from Hong Kong to America anyway, so it doesn't matter, from West Coast to East Coast. Cool. So I moved from California to Connecticut, to the East Coast, and I work, and they promoted me. Instead of doing sales, I started doing recruiting and human resources work. And I've been with the same company till the point I gave birth. So
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned like giving birth, and I guess as a result, you no longer work for that company because having a child, which leads to like how I become aware of you. Obviously, you said you found me through listening to the episode featuring Randy, and then you follow me, and I checked out that, oh, you follow me, and I checked out your content. It revolves around obviously your kind of family life, your child. And what really kind of intrigued me was your kind of focus on getting your child to embrace kind of your culture, your kind of like passion, which is Cantonese culture and the language and such. And it's unique because he, or your child, is not just Asian. He's also of another background. He's Asian and also Black. So it's where he has to take on an additional culture in a sense, and learning a new language and all that stuff. And you've been documenting it, and to great success, because I could see him like learning day by day, and it's really nice to see his journey, and also your journey being like a mom producing content to help other moms to help their children kind of learn Cantonese, or at least kind of help with just how to take care of a child and like all that stuff. So that's kind of your next steps in terms of your kind of not just your family life, but also kind of your your work is a sense, because being a content creator is now your kind of job, other than of course being a full-time mom, doing a lot of stuff for your child. So can you just talk about like how that gets started in terms of content creating?
Yeah, absolutely. I would never have thought of I would have my own YouTube channel or become a podcaster at all, um, until right around, I think probably when my son was around like year and a half, 2 years old. I felt down, like something about me just not, I'm not being myself, and I didn't realize it. So I have to thank my husband for having a serious talk with me, because I think, people that are parents, especially if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're just so caught up in the day-to-day stuff, right? Wake up, like feed the baby, like cook, clean, then like, cook again, clean again, right? You're always on the go, and then taking them to play dates and stuff. So so I just kind of like got into that rhythm. I was almost in like a survival mode at the beginning, just because it's so new. Like it is so new, and being a stay-at-home mom is by choice. Okay, so I just want to say that I always wanted to do that, and so that's by choice. It wasn't like, my I couldn't work for the company anymore. Like I if I really wanted to, I could. But anyway, so right around like around, when he was around 2, I think, one day, just, husband wife, you sit down and you talk, and then he was like, "What's up with you?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "No, like, what's up with you? You're not being yourself." And then I was like, "I'm fine. What are you talking about? Like, come on." So he dig deep. And then like I would just start saying all this rambling, like all the stuff that I have to do in a day-to-day basis. And then like how basically I just kind of lost who I was for a little bit, right? Because I was working, like I'm always like hitting goals. It's all about like go 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 in that sense, in the business world and the professional world. And then I always have, like if I hit my goal, I have something to show for. And then I feel like being a mom raising a child, you don't really have like, oh, like, look at me, I've done this, I've done that. Like you just do it because that's what you do. So anyways, what I found is I just really miss the professional part of me, I guess. And then I want to have some goals and stuff. And then I just started thinking about, well, maybe I should start my own business, right? And then so then that way I can still be a stay-at-home mom and still, have the best of both worlds. I'm like, shoot, I don't want to go into debt, like, right? Take out a huge loan to start my own business. So I was like, okay, well, and then that's when I was kind of thinking about different things to do, like reselling stuff online. Then the pandemic hit, and then so many people, right, including yourself, content creator, that's like we're like, okay, this is the perfect timing to do it. And similarly, well, I actually, during the beginning of the pandemic, there's so many free online like webinar, like courses, right? Free online class, like Tony Robbins, or photography class. So I made a point that I said every day I am going to learn something new. I'm just going to sign up a free webinar to learn something new every single day. So that's what I did. And then I stumbled upon Think Media, which is a YouTube, like channel, or they're everywhere now, but teaching people how to become a successful YouTuber, basically. So I was like, okay, so what is my niche? And then I think about it. And then I was like, it will be kind of like a fun project to do it with my son, Giannis. And then, at first it wasn't really Cantonese based. So if you go back all the way back to my like, at the beginning video, it was supposed to be just like mom talking to parents, talking to each other, like bounce off ideas from each
Like a
other.
family channel.
Exactly. But as I'm doing it as Giannis is getting older and older, and then I just want him to speak more Cantonese, and I want him to know the culture, right? So I think that's kind of how I really genuinely think that so many family in a Cantonese family in a foreign country, um, even though mom and dad are both Cantonese, as soon as they go to school, they are going to speak English, right? And they are going to slowly lose their Cantonese. And I think it's kind of sad to me. It's really important. I'm very proud to be Cantonese. And part of it also is because my parents, they don't really speak English. So it would be really, I would be so sad that if even my parents cannot, communicate with my son, like their own grandkid. So I think that's an extra like motivation for me to like, take it to the next level. So that's my YouTube channel journey.
That's great. And your kind of reason for starting it, it's amazing because I think your drive or your motivation it speaks to me just because you're doing it so that you can help your son learn Cantonese and help other moms who also want to teach their kids Cantonese, like tips and tricks. You can teach them tips and tricks on how to like engage their daughters or sons to like not be bored by it or like actively want to learn it. So I think it's really great. And you talked about like why you do it in terms of like, oh, you think it's important. Cantonese is very like holds a lot of weight too. But why is it so like I always ask my Cantonese kind of guess like why is Cantonese so important to you, or like why does it matter for you? It's like, oh, people will often say, oh, Cantonese can be a dying language or culture, but it's whatever. But for you, it seems like it matters. So why does it matter to you, like a deeper level wise?
Language is more than just language. It's just a key to open up a whole new room full of books on the shelves. Like it's full of history and culture. It's not just a language, right? And I think that's why it's very important. Like I love listening to stories from when my grandparents was a kid, when my great grandparents was a kid. So just imagine that without the ability of speaking the language is going to be really hard to, it's more difficult, it's more difficult to really like understand our root, like where we are from and why a certain things is important to us, right? And yeah, I think that's the main reason why it is so important to me, because a certain phrases, if we say it in Cantonese, like it's really hard to translate. You have to know the language, otherwise
Yeah.
you like it's not fun anymore. Like it's hard to so you have to know it. And I feel like perhaps because I majority, well, not majority at this point, like half of my life were in Hong Kong. So the movie that I watched, the show that I grew up with, the music that I grew up with, I want to be able to share with my son. I want him to be able to enjoy some of the stuff that from my childhood. And I think that's why it's very important for me to know the language and pass it on.
That's great. And I hope like listeners that are listening to this and like have their own kind of native language, regardless if it's Cantonese or what other language it may be,
Mhm.
if it's something that you're not that strong in and you want to improve on, definitely find resources to further improve and just continue it. And even if you're not great at this moment, you can always get better, and that's okay. It's always a journey. You don't have to be like 100% right away because no one's gonna get it perfect on the first try. As long as you keep trying, that's good enough. And like to pass it on to the next generation, I think that's more important. And I hope more people are recognizing that, because I think so much of like at least diaspora Asian in the West, so much of it has always been assimilation where you gotta fit into the Western culture, or like just forget about your kind of ancestors or like just your home kind of culture. But I think there's there's a place where we could embrace our Asian identity and culture, and also our kind of Western culture that we are living with. And I think
Mhm.
how you're raising your child is like where he gets best of both worlds, like the good and the bad of both sides, and hopefully he gets all the great stuff that you want him to get from each culture, right? And like I have so many questions about like your kind of journey with raising your child and such, just because
Mhm.
it speaks to me as like my wife and I are expecting a baby is on his way and such. And like my biggest kind of, I guess not issue, but like worry or concern in terms of raising a child, especially being in the West, is just the kind of how to raise a child that is Asian and being in the West, where they get multiple culture kind of influences and like impacted on them through school and just everyday life. How do you kind of make sure that they get like both sides equal, or like as close to like, oh, a perfect blend as possible? Like, have you given much thought? Obviously you have given much thought because you're raising a kid having to deal with that every single day. So have that journey been difficult, or how has it been in general?
It is so well. First of all, congratulations. I'm
Thank you.
so excited for you and your wife and your family. And then is that it's great that you are thinking about this already, right? For me, as my husband would say sometimes, that I kind of live in a la la land. I'm kind
Mm,
of like a happy go lucky type of
mm,
person. He is the one that who prepped me when we were dating, when our relationship is starting to get like more serious. He warned me that he's like, you need to really think about who you're dealing with right now. As you said, my son is half black. So he just tried to educate me on um what does it mean to be black in America. And then sharing, like sending me videos and kind of like documentary and stuff, and just for me to learn more about it. He said, your son is going to be half black, so you really need to think about it. And I was like, okay, so for me it's like,
mm,
okay, so what, like that's fine. But the more he talked about it, the more I think about it. And I don't want to turn this into like a racism or anything
mhm,
like that, but it's more like mixed, kind of like what you said, right? Like the mixed culture. So for me, now that my son is 4, and I think it's just kind of like my theory is that my son is going to watch me very carefully of everything that I do and I say and I act, just how I live my life, right? So I think, because I my point is that we need to demonstrate, I guess. if I if you and your wife are having conversation about, like all different cultures are great, and then you talk about how you grew up, you moved from Hong Kong to Canada, and then he or she, your baby, is going to know that there's so much more outside of this family, right? And then for me, I also go to all black church. So it's a church that my husband grew up in. So everyone knew, who this kid's dad is and family is. And he is very, so I guess I submerge myself into their culture as well. But also I share a lots of Chinese culture with the family, like any like Zhongcaoji, Sunning, like Mid Autumn Festival, like Chinese New Year, all that stuff. I will cook up a storm. That's when I watch Made with Lao, right? Learn all the special dishes, and then like just make a big meal. And then because my son is learning, and then I just teach the whole family what it means, like for us to, this dish, if the meaning of this dish is this and that, and then this is why, and they're very interested too. So they are very cultural family too. So I hope I answer your question. Like, I don't really.
Yeah, I think you did. And I guess another question that pops up is like, you talk about just demonstrating to your child how to be a good person and all that stuff, how to deal with everyday stuff. And I'm sure your husband is doing his part into like letting the child know like you are black, you're half black, half Asian, and there are certain things that might happen to you and all this. I think you're just because your husband is American and all that stuff, he knows what to expect at being in America. So he's got to giving you the warning, but also letting the kid know this might happen, how to prepare and stuff. I think for you, you're just taking it day by day because you haven't grown up really in America as a child. So you got like some understanding, but not the full understanding like your husband does. So
Mhm.
how do you and your husband kind of go through race specific type of situation or like education with your child? Like there's been a lot of talks like when do you start teaching your children about race or like about those kind of issues? Like some say, oh, you don't need to teach them right away, but in reality, the earlier they are exposed to it, that I guess the easier it is for them to kind of learn and accept or embrace. So have you kind of have discuss? I'm sure you and your husband have discussion about this already. So how do you guys go upon it?
So for us, we spend more time in discussing like parenting style.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and he, I don't think he has really like sit down and like have a serious
Hmm.
conversation about you are half black yet. And
Yeah.
by the way, it's so funny. My son said to his grandpa, one time I teach online Cantonese.
Hmm.
So I was singing song with kids, and then my son ran and like wants to sing with us too. And then grandpa was asking my husband, does he know what she is saying? And then he heard and he turns around and he's like, what do you mean? I'm Chinese. So so he's like really proud of that. Anyway, so that's kind of off subject. So I don't think he really has a serious talk with him about that yet. But again, I think it's more like listening to conversation like adults is having when it comes to that. But with parenting, we talk about we I mean, you will know, like I feel like most of the time when we fight, when we argue, is over parenting, how to raise him. He's a very strong, like dominant, like masculine type of man, right? um and I'm very like gentle, like motherly, right? So so to him a certain way is like I'm making my son soft, right? And then for to me it's like, okay, he's still a kid, like now he's 4, he's a little bit older, but when he was 1 or 2, I'm like, okay, you don't need to be so hard on him, he's still a baby, right? um so we talk about parenting style, but majority of the time really he kind of trusts me, he let me do my thing. um and he is kind of like taking like a back seat, right? And just let me run with it, and then he will back me up, and he will just be the bad cop that he call
Oh,
himself. And when it comes to discipline, um but yeah, so we just try to periodically have sit down together and talk to each other about different things. And one thing that we do as a family, the three of us, so my son, my husband, and I, we will have our family meeting every Sunday, Sunday night, and just kind of go over what our week from the like our last week, and then we will talk about our plan, kind of like what is going to happen, our schedule for this coming week, and then what is something that we should continue doing, what is something that we should stop doing, and what is something that we should start doing. So that's kind of like what we do. So yeah, and
that's a really good advice for myself and also others that are either considering having children in the future or already in the process of having children or is raising their own kid. I think those are very helpful tips. And I want to talk about like your kind of journey being a mother. Like it has been 4 years, and what do you think you have learned the most in these 4 years? of having your child and parenting your child with your husband?
So, a couple things that come in my mind first. Number one is husband and wife, right? As partner, you have to be ready to have difficult conversation, right? And you are not going to agree with everything, about your thoughts and how you want to do things. So I think just enjoy the process, rather it's like good or bad. It's just part of the process, and make sure that the partners have the same big picture and share the same vision. And then it's just the matter of you're taking A, B, or C route to your destination together. I think that's really important. And then number two is, as a 4 years of motherhood, is every day I just remind myself I need to live my life as how I want my kids to live. I guess just be the best version of myself. That's a better way to put it. Be the best version of myself. So, I try to exercise every day, like make sure that I eat healthy and maintain my friendship and still have my own personal time, right? Because I want him to be able to do that as well, right? So I think that too is the two biggest things that I got out of 4 years of being a mom.
That's great. And I think your advice or what you have said you learned could apply for those in any kind of relationship, like
That's true.
boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it may be. If they're like taking it a serious route, how to have have and maintain like a healthy and stable relationship. So that's great.
That's
and
true.
and going back to like your content and what you plan to do with it, because you've been going at it for quite a while now, since like you said, pandemic, and you've been consistently putting out content and growing as well. What are your kind of plans, or like, as you're like, oh, I love goals, what are your goals for kind of like the channel? Because I think for you, at the end of the day, your family comes first. So your channel, regardless how like much you care about it, how passionate about it, it's always gonna be number two. So
Mhm.
what plans do you have for your number two?
Very good question. So, for you who are listening, I also have a podcast too. It's called Us Mamios. So YouTube channel is Hey Mamio, and then the name came from my son just called me Hey Mamio, Hey Mamio. So then I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to turn it into Hey Mamio channel. But the podcast is Us Mamios, and is in only Cantonese, and it's about me interviewing Cantonese moms from all over the world just to learn from each other. It has different topic every episode, but then also they will share the difficulties, right? To how to, or the journey of them teaching their children Cantonese. So those are my babies, my second and third babies. And my goal with that is, of course, to start being able to monetize and, start bringing in income, which we started doing that. And then it's small. And that if you're a content creator, right? Like you sit in front of the computer, you edit for like hours and hours, and then you're like, okay, I get this little paycheck. But it's not about money at the beginning, right? But then if you think of big picture and stuff like that, of course I want to be able to do this, right? Raise my kids, spend time with my family, also still pump out content for YouTube and podcast, but also be able to travel around the world. And all I need to bring is my family and my computer, and then I'll be able to do that. So freedom of time, and it's very important, is so it's not really like a specific um, goal. And what I want to do is I want to be able to do what I just mentioned within, in 2023. So I guess that's the time frame that I, kind of want to plan. And then perhaps I want to take my kid and move back to Hong Kong for a while and let him kind of experience that himself.
And I'm sure slowly by slowly, with you consistently putting out content, it will get to that point and you reach those goals. Because it seems like all throughout your life, once you have like a goal or kind of thing you want to reach to, you just step out of your comfort zone and just go towards it, and you find success in whatever way it means for you.
Well, yes, definitely. My number one priority, my big rock is, having raising a healthy kid, right? But then also take care of my family. So those are my big rocks. And then everything else are just the little pebbles, right? That will fit in when it fits in. And then one thing that I do want to say though, I need to, so family meeting helps because we talk about things, right? Sometimes, trust me, I'm not I can't do it all. Like it was, my husband would complain like, hey, you haven't been doing laundry. Like the laundry is really full, right? Or like, so I do slack in a certain things, but I think is part of the learning experience. So sometimes I get offended. I'm like, what do you mean? Like I work really hard. Like I'm editing till like 3 a.m. So why are you complaining about laundries? But it's true, it's part of like what we should do like as parents. So yeah, like to answer your question, yes, that is number one priority. But then I also want to once again back to the thing that like, we can do if we manage our time, if we plan accordingly, if we spend our time wisely, we can do more than just one or two things. I think that's the message that I want to send to him. If you really want to do something, just go for it. And then like you can make things work. You can make things work. And, like, and I'm so lucky that my husband is very supportive of what I do. And so sometimes if I'm doing, this, and then he'll put the kids to sleep or, give him a bath or like just kind of like, hey, don't go in there, don't interrupt type of things. So
That's great. And it just speaks to like how great of a team or like a partnership you and your husband have to ensure like both you and himself are able to do what you guys want and still have your kid and raise him well and like work in unison and all that stuff. And as we're ending the show, it's been such a great time talking to you. And on that note, thank you so much for joining me today. And
thank
it was
you.
really fun talking to you and hearing your story and like learning like parenting tips and all that stuff. That would be very useful for anyone. And for those who want to know more about you, your content, and just like follow you and your journey, where can they find you? All the places.
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Hey Mamio, HeyMommio. And then also I'm on YouTube, Hey Mamio. And then also I have a podcast called Us Mamios. So USMOMMIOS. So that's how you can find me.
Perfect. And again, thank you so much for joining me. And
Thank you.
best of luck to your raising your child and your content creating and your small business and everything that you do. And hope to keep in touch. And I can't wait to see what the future holds for you. And
Thank
on
you,
this note,
Kyle.
thank you for listening and hope you join us for the next time for What Kind of Asian Are You podcast. Bye bye.
Bye bye.